Our reading today is from Matthew chapter 2, the first 12 verses. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. May God bless these words to our understanding.
When Matthew tells his Christmas story, he doesn't spend a lot of time on the birth of Jesus. He spends a lot of time on something which happens later. Somewhere, if you read the text, up to 2 years. Because right after this, Herod, when I first entered ministry was in the days of the Iraq conflict. And I described Herod as the Saddam Hussein of his day. And so right after this, Herod orders the slaughter of all the baby boys born in Bethlehem 2 years old and under, because the Magi, having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, went home by a different road. So some point after the birth of Jesus, these strange visitors show up in Bethlehem. Well, first they show up in Jerusalem and cause mass consternation. Because not only is Herod upset, not only is Herod a little disturbed by these people who come up and say, "We've come to honor the one born to be king of the Jews," and Herod's thinking, no, I am king of the Jews. Herod, who has already killed 2 of his sons because he was a little bit paranoid. So Herod hears this, and he's put out. But also all Jerusalem is put out because they're afraid of what Herod's going to do. These strange men show up in Jerusalem, and they consult. And Herod says, "Go to Bethlehem. Go to Bethlehem. You'll find him there. And after you've found him, come back. Tell me where he is, so that I too can go and do him honor." So these visitors, and Matthew never tells us how many there are. He never really tells us who they are. All the traditional text is Magi from the east. Magi probably don't mean kings. Kings is a bit of a later adaptation of our story. They probably mean Zoroastrians from Persia. Zoroastrianism is an ancient Persian religion. It was the predominant religion in that area, which is now Iran, before Islam spread out from Arabia. And one of the marks of Zoroastrianism was that their priests would look to the stars. They were astrologers. I suspect one of the reasons we become kings rather than astrologers is Christian tradition and Jewish tradition don't look kindly on astrologers, on astrology. But at any rate, these strange visitors, however many there were, unlikely there were only 3, because a traveling party of 3 is a little vulnerable. And even if there were just 3 important people, shall we say, they would have servants, and they would have helpers, they would have an entire entourage. We say 3 because Matthew says 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And we'll get to those. Those are strange gifts to bring to a newborn child. Anyway, we'll get there. There's a joke about if 3 magi had been wise women and they would have brought much better gifts. But these strange visitors show up in Matthew's story. Why do these strange visitors show up in Matthew's story, bearing these very strange gifts? One of the things Matthew is trying to do in his gospel is show that this man, this Jesus, from Nazareth, born in Bethlehem, is not just for the Jewish people. That what God is doing in Jesus, God is doing for all the world. And one of the ways Matthew does this is have these visitors from the east, from outside, who recognize what has happened better than the rulers of Judea recognize what has happened. In fact, the rulers from Judea, judging from Herod's response, have no idea what's going on. They don't know anything important has happened. Otherwise, Herod might have reacted a little bit faster. And the gifts. A little bit later, we're going to sing the carol, We Three Kings, which discuss the gifts, verse by verse. Gold. Throughout human history, in areas which had gold, not so much in North America because they didn't really have gold here, but in areas which had gold, gold was seen as the thing for important people. The important people accumulated the gold, the rulership, the leaders. They may have used the less important people to dig it out of the ground and get it out of the rock, but the important people accumulated the gold. Gold is a sign of majesty, even to this day. Frankincense. Even to this day, in many religious traditions, part of their gathering, especially on high holy days, is the burning of incense. It goes back to, within Judeo-Christian roots, back to the temple. And the burning of incense was a way to carry, the smoke from the incense would carry your prayers to God with a divine pleasing smell, which is probably why it was used in temples, because burning sacrifices, not a pleasing smell. But even to this day, in high Anglican churches especially, on high holy days, they'll ring out all the smells and bells, as some of my classmates used to call it, and the censer would wave. Incense is some of those things that is associated with the divine. And myrrh. Myrrh is a spice sometimes used as burial, but it's a rich spice used for important situations. So Matthew not only has these visitors from the east come to say, see, God's at work doing something for all the world. Even those from outside recognize what God is doing here. One of the things I've recognized throughout both Matthew and Luke in our Christmas stories this year is the people who you don't expect recognize that God is doing something very different. but they bring gifts which show how God is active here, which show that this is not just some random child. The Magi show up and say, "Where is the one who has been born, the King of the Jews?" A title which will appear again in Matthew's Gospel but once. When Jesus is lifted up and hanging on a cross. King of the Jews isn't necessarily a convenient title. It's a threatening title. But these strange visitors come and they say something about this baby. By their very presence, they say something about this baby. As we live through this Epiphany season, the season after Epiphany, which will extend this year until the end of February and the beginning of Lent, because Easter is really late this year, we are invited to pay attention, to be on the lookout, so that we too can recognize what new things God is doing in our midst, what new things God is doing in the world. Maybe we recognize it because somebody we know tells us, or maybe some strange news source, some strange visitor will come in and say, "Wake up, look around. We've come to find out what God's doing. Will you help us look?" May we be aware, alert, and ready for the strange visitors in our midst. Amen.